Hi, this is Bill Aimone.
And this is Peter Purcell.
Welcome to our next most interesting podcast. We're going to be uncovering some very interesting and new and unique jargon. So today I'm going to be talking to my business partner, Peter Purcell.
Hey, this is Peter Purcell, and boy, Bill has really laid it on deep. I'm not really quite sure how to make this 100% interesting, but I will do my best.
Well, Peter, first of all, we're going to be talking about some IT stuff that's very important for a lot of organizations, and it actually drives IT cost efficiencies, which are
right. So when you turn around and you think about making IT reliable,
that's the information technology department.
Yeah, the information technology department. Reliable, predictable, secure, cost-effective, etc. One of the first things you have to do is get a handle on your assets. What do you own? What are you supporting? What is the business using? For those of you who are not in IT, everything that I'm about to talk about today, or we're going to discuss today, applies directly to if you were to have an asset management/maintenance system at your company, whether it's a fleet of trucks, a bunch of equipment, assets. How do you track your assets and how do you do it well?
Yeah, and I think this is also good for those finance people who like me who really are looking to help your IT department improve their return on their investments. And these are some key things that we can be putting in place. So part of this discussion will also help some of the finance people out there understand a little bit about what can they be asking their IT people to do, and maybe some little pointers on how to sound smart in front of the IT guys.
Yeah, well, actually, it's more like stump them.
You use this word CMDB.
Right. A CMDB in the IT world is called the Configuration Management Database. All it really is, I'm not even going to break out the words because that would take too long. The bottom line is what this is a database of your assets. A laptop, I own software, I own network devices, I own cable, I own
routers.
A lot of stuff. Routers, well, yeah, that's part of, yeah. So you're a finance guy. Very good. You just stumped me. But yeah, so all of those things.
Is this also code that you built?
You don't usually, you can put code in there from it's a system perspective, but you don't actually put your actual code in this.
Well, no, but that's part of what you're managing.
Yeah, part of what you're managing. Yeah, if I need to understand.
You said configuration. I was wondering about customization.
Yeah, my customization is a configuration in the IT world. Remember that when you have a consultant come at you and go, oh, this is only a configuration in the ERP. What you need to do is immediately run.
That's lie number 2.
That's lie number 2.
Okay.
So anyway, a configuration management database is typically the heart of if you would think about an ERP system for IT. And this all falls under enterprise service management. Bottom line is, if you want to manage your assets right, you want to pay for them and know that you're paying the right amount for licensing fees to make sure that you're getting the service from your outsourcer. You need to understand what you own. And what you own is in a configuration management database.
So it's a spreadsheet.
It could be, depending on your size. But most of our larger clients, they'll use a system called ServiceNow, which I think a lot of you all have heard about. And ServiceNow, the heart of that, like the GL, if you will, of that system is called the CMDB. It's your assets. Okay. But anyway, so to talk about the CMDB, it sounds pretty simple, right? I get my assets, I get a list of my assets, I put it in this database, voila, I know now what I own. But it's not really that simple. One of the first things, and we've found this over and over and over again, is what am I going to do with the information? You know, in the previous podcast, Bill, one of the first questions you asked was, I wanted to dive into job costing, which to me is actually a fascinating subject. Much more fascinating than this one is, by the way, to me. But hey, so you wanted to know what is a company going to do with job cost information? What kind of decisions you're going to make? You have to ask the same question about your CMDB before you set it up. What are you going to do? It's not just a matter of let me capture, hey, I have this server. This is the server processor. This is the server amount of storage. This is the server memory size. This is the server MAC ID, which is a universal identification for a piece of hardware that gets connected to the internet, by the way, or any network. you have to step back and go, okay, what am I going to do with the information?
If you have a server that's really old, or maybe you have a server that needs to be updated.
Okay, but how do I know that? If I don't capture
but you capture that in your
exactly the CMDB. So you hit the point exactly. So one of the biggest things that we recommend our clients do is start off with essentially create a data model. Understand what kind of analysis you're going to do around these assets. Do I need to understand when end of life is going to be for the asset? When is end of support? Can I even go into extended support? What's really important to me is what capacity information is really important to me. Because as we get deeper into this podcast, all this information has to be maintained. So the more I ask for, the more somebody has to go into the system and add stuff.
Do you also want to manage criticality of the application as well? Is that kind of part of it?
That's exactly right.
For example, if it's part of a customer-facing system.
Yeah, if it's customer-facing system,
or
it's
if you're
critical.
a utility company and it's part of your
storm response
notification,
system. Storm notification. Again, customer-facing, but you may have a storm response system if you're at a utility,
and that's very critical.
That's
and any of the assets underneath that support that,
all the IT assets, I need to know that. But the bottom line is, one of the first things that you have to do before setting up the CMDB is understand what kind of information you're going to get, and what kind of information do you need. Okay, because what that does, that drives a lot. It drives policies and procedures for when I do have a new asset. How do I go and put that asset in? And what does completing the information really mean? What does it mean to be complete? It also drives, if I want to get like number of incidents that are tied to an asset, that means, I need an interface into the ticketing system so I can keep track of the incidents. Let's say I want to understand what is the level of support for this particular asset. That may mean that I have to integrate with a third-party website to tell me when is the asset going to be out of support, or what is the latest, greatest, best patch to put in.
Or how about this? Let's say it's a server that keeps going down, and you want to be able to track. Somebody says, that server keeps going down, and you find out it only went down twice, but it was during a critical time. Or maybe it's going down every day, and it's time to go buy another server. So understanding what kind of information you want to have at your fingertips when you look at an asset is critical. It's no different than doing a reporting strategy if you're trying to figure out what sort of operational reports you need to run your business. IT needs to do the same exercise to understand what kind of information do you need to capture around these assets. And where does that information come from? It's no different than what we do with our clients when we do a financial data model, right, for operational reporting. You start with, okay, when we look, what are the types of questions that you're going to ask around these assets, and let's make sure the data is there. Okay. It's that simple. The exercise, of course, is, the enterprise architecture group, who are basically the standards police. They're going to want to look at something a little differently than maybe the operations group that are actually supporting it, or even the outsourced providers when they're supporting it. So you need to make sure that you include the right folks in the room as you're trying to understand what kind of information you want to capture around the asset. Okay, so really it requires a pretty good move amongst the IT organization to come together, agree on standards, agree on nomenclature, and what are they calling things.
Exactly, because criticality and tier sounds like it's pretty simple, but criticality to you may be completely different than criticality for me. Or tier to you may be completely different than tier for me. So coming up with a common vernacular, coming up with a good, a metadata model that enables you to identify what you really want to track. That's very key.
Okay, so let's say you got a list of this is all the stuff we want to capture, we want to do, got everybody to agree on it. You got a good data dictionary around all this and what this stuff means and everything.
Correct.
I mean, how do you go
What's next?
Yeah, I mean, how do you decide what's an asset, what's not an asset?
In an optimal world, what you do is you have systems that will go out and do discovery on the network. So they'll go out and actually ping different pieces of hardware and software that are connected to your network. And if you have created your CMDB correctly, you are able to go out and identify what's out there and come back
Okay, but
and
how does
validate it against what you have.
Okay, but I think about like at home, I've got my router and I look at pieces of equipment and it's all this gobbledygook. It's like these numbers and stuff. How do they know what's what?
Yeah, so that's part of the CMDB is that gobbledygook, which is gobbledygook to you and me, that's actually a unique identifier for that particular asset. And so that's actually a field that's captured. And because you and I don't understand that gobbledygook, what would be important to us in the CMDB is to say, oh, that's Bill's iPhone. Oh, that's Peter's iPhone. I mean, that's the translation that we're just talking about.
So do companies connect their network to the CMDB? So if something gets unplugged or something, it alerts them?
Yeah, it's
or
interesting you say that. The answer to your question is yes. So the CMDB is the core that gives me the assets. Then I will have a system, that's that EMS system that I'm talking about, the Enterprise Management System. So the thing will have a big dashboard, essentially. It's going to go out and query all my assets, make sure if you do this right, you have all sorts of software that allow you to go out, is this asset up or down? Do I get an alert because this asset's running out of memory? Or, the asset will actually sometimes alert you when something is wrong. Or, hey, we're having a denial of service attack, so I need to shut this group of assets down. That's why it's so important for that database to be accurate and correct, so I know exactly who's doing what at any point in time. I have a client who there's a big red button that'll shut down the data center, and they had a kid go and say, ooh, big red button. Push the button and shut down the data center. That has happened. When you take your kid to work, the moral of the story is tell them don't push red buttons.
Don't take your kids in the data center, people.
Yeah, well, they're going to be bored, first of all. But
well, it should be locked, I think.
Yeah, it should be locked. But don't push the red button. But yeah, that's the importance of having that and then having the CMDB so you understand what your assets are, but also making sure that the data model makes sense. So one, I'm looking at the right things, and two, when something happens, I know exactly what do I do with it.
Okay.
Now here's a challenge, right? Setting it up is one thing, but maintaining it is something else. And so one of the things that we have found is it's policies and procedures and it's workflow.
So when you say maintaining it, do you have to hire somebody to maintain it?
We don't suggest you do that. You typically do have one person in your department, just from a technical perspective, making sure it's up and running and life is good. But done right, the people who are actually supporting the assets, the asset owners, if they make a change from a policy and procedure perspective, they need to go and make sure that that change is properly reflected in the CMDB. So let's just step back for a second. We're going to talk about asset commissioning, asset maintenance, and asset decommissioning, okay, within the context of the CMDB. Asset commissioning is, I'm bringing in a new asset. Yeah. You need to have very strong policies and procedures, and inside IT, a governance model. First of all, the enterprise architecture group typically has to sign off on, is this a standard piece of equipment or is this a standard asset or not? Security has to sign off on, is this going to be a secure asset on the network? Then you obviously have budget, right? Is the business going to pay for it? So there's a whole series of things, which, by the way, we have other podcasts to talk about all these processes. But once I bring that asset in, from a commissioning perspective, one of the things that we recommend, and our clients don't always do this, is make sure that as part of the commissioning process, you cannot sign off that the asset is up and running and good to go unless the CMDB has been properly updated, is considered complete, and has been properly updated with that asset information. Down to, and this is the gotcha, make sure that the discovery vehicle, whatever you are using, remember I said you can go and look on the network and make sure the asset's up and running and all that? Make sure that's working and recognizes that asset. Otherwise, it's not properly commissioned.
Okay, so really it's a closed loop to make sure I commissioned it, I see it, I'm connecting it,
exactly.
It's there. Essentially, you're talking about basic housekeeping, though, Peter. I mean,
I know, but you'd be amazed how many people don't do it.
Well, I bet you our clients do it after we're through with them.
After we're through. And then maintenance. Maintenance is pretty much the same thing. people will oftentimes go in and try to do something to one of their assets that they own, and they always forget to go back and make sure, one, CMDB was properly updated, okay? So for example, I just upgraded my PC to Windows 11. I need to go into the CMDB. We have a CMDB, by the way, Bill, and all of our PCs are there with what's loaded on it. It's in Excel, what's loaded on the PC, what licenses we have for that PC, etc. So I upgraded a bunch of PCs to Windows 11 over the weekend, and I forgot to go in and update to make sure that our CMDB was correct. You know what happened? Todd came and smacked me on the back of the head. First of all, he said I shouldn't have done the updates, which is true. I was just bored. But secondly, the fact that I didn't go back and update the CMDB. And so there's two ways to catch that. One way is through a process, or a second way, if you do a discovery and it doesn't recognize that asset for what it is because it's different now, then that creates a ping. So holding people responsible to make sure they update that is pretty key.
Okay, got it. So having the right process in place, it sounds like it's key. Discipline. Right. There's probably some level of accountability. There's probably some tie back to bonuses and that type of thing.
Exactly. Year-end reviews, et cetera.
Reviews and all that.
I mean, and again, just to equate it to a truck, if I put a new battery in a truck, I need to go into my maintenance system to say, it has a new battery as of this date. Because if I happen to have a policy that says I'm going to swap out a battery every 2 years and I didn't put that data in correctly, I could be swapping that battery out completely out of cycle and wasting money. So,
got it.
And then the last piece, which is really interesting, is decommissioning, which is when you retire an asset or you're no longer using the asset, taking it out of the CMDB, or at least indicating in the CMDB that's been retired. Amazed at the number of people that will retire assets and then not go back. And it's typically just flip a switch, because then what you do is you have people wasting time. You have computer cycles being wasted, going out looking for an asset that may or may not be there. And then when that asset isn't there, somebody has to chase down, why is that asset not there? Is that a security issue? Is it somebody tripped over the plug and pulled it out of the wall? You know, what's going on? And so it's just a bunch of wasted time, right? So when we talk about cost-effective IT, being able to know exactly what you have and where it is pretty critical.
That all makes sense, and it sounds like these are ways IT can potentially manage their costs better too. Because
without a doubt,
if you go out there and you find out you have a bunch of assets that you're paying for, let's say it's software that people aren't using, you could save some money by getting rid of, renegotiating your license agreements.
Right, and putting in and cleaning up a CMDB, we have seen clients save significant amounts of money by doing that.
Okay.
Because what happens is the business will stop using something. Somebody won't decommission it, and you continue, it's a subscription, and you just continue to pay money for it. You know, or I have an asset there, and I have to pay for somebody to support that asset, and if I'm not using that asset, then why am I paying somebody to support that asset? It's just things like that.
All right, so my takeaway here, if you're a CFO or controller of a company, go ask your IT guy, hey,
is your CMDB up to date?
Can I take a look at your CMDB? First, say that.
Yes.
And then if he looks at you funny, that's another conversation. Or then ask him if it's up to date and how is he keeping it up to date. Yeah. And if he doesn't have it, that's a good way to help your IT guys.
It's a worthwhile investment.
Make that investment and watch the ROI on IT go up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. IT then no longer becomes that black box that you just sink all that money into and you never quite know what you get out of it.
Or if you're say you're an IT director and you don't know where to start on this, you can email Peter at Trinergy.com, and he can send you a list of things to think about and leading practices for
I'll be glad to.
CMDB.
In fact, we can even have a conversation.
Even get started. You might not want to talk to him. I enjoy talking to him, but you've already heard what he's got to say, but you just want that list. Just email Peter at Trinergy.com.
Well, thank you very much, Bill, for taking time to talk to me, man. I appreciate it.